blade came out so fast that half the mess hall did not even see it happen. 1 second Threx was leaning over my table with his usual smirk, and the next second there was 15 centimeters of gray metal pointed at my chest. I did not move back. I did not even blink. My name is Lena Ashford, and I had been on Station Karos 9 for 11 days. 11 days of learning which corridors flickered with bad wiring. 11 days of learning which vending units gave you actual food instead of protein paste. And 11 days of watching this particular Vandari trader decide that humans were the perfect target for his boredom. Threx was almost 2 meters tall, built like a wall with legs, his hide a mottled gray that shimmered faintly under the mess hall lights. He came from Vandar Prime, a soft green world with no predators bigger than a house cat, and weather so mild that storms made the evening news. He had never once in his life needed to worry about something trying to kill him before breakfast. I came from Earth. You gonna sit there and stare at me, dirt worlder, he said, or are you gonna move? There was no chair dispute. He had picked this fight from nothing, the same way he had picked one with a Farai engineer the day before, and a Tiskal cargo handler 2 days before that. Nobody on this station wanted trouble with a Vandari trader family, so nobody had said a word. Station security looked the other way, because humans were still new to the compact, only 6 years in, and nobody wanted to spend political capital defending the new species over a lunch table. I looked at the knife. Ceremonial edgework ran along the spine of the blade, the kind of detail that told me this was a status weapon, not a tool. It was meant to frighten, not to be used. Threx wanted a story to tell his friends, a video clip of the scared human backing into a wall. He was not going to get one. I stood up slowly, and instead of stepping back, I stepped forward. 1 step. The room went dead silent. Somewhere behind Threx, a Farai crest snapped upright in shock. A Tiskal near the drink dispenser froze mid-pour. I closed the distance between us until the knife was too close to swing properly, until his eyes were the only thing in my whole world, and I let him see exactly what was behind mine. Not anger, not fear that controlled me, just readiness. You really don't want to do that, I said, quiet enough that only he could hear it clearly. His mandibles clicked, a Vandari tell for confidence, but there was a flicker underneath it now, something uncertain. Prey brains recognize a script breaking even before they understand why. Where I come from, I continued, a blade that size is not a warning, it's an invitation, and we don't turn those down. I did not touch him yet. I let 5 seconds pass, 5 long seconds where the only sound in the mess hall was recycled air moving through old vents. Then I reached out, slow enough that he could track every centimeter of the movement, and closed my hand gently around his wrist. Not gripping, just present. I guided the blade down until it pointed at the deck instead of at me. Put it away, I said. Station security is going to want a word about this either way. Let's not make it worse than it already is. For one terrible moment I thought he might pull free and swing anyway. I could see the animal part of him working behind his eyes, the part that had never learned what to do when intimidation failed to produce fear. Paradise worlds do not just fail to teach you how to fight. They fail to teach you what happens after fighting does not work. He sheathed the blade. Then he turned and walked out of the mess hall so quickly it was almost a run, and the door hissed shut behind him like a period at the end of a sentence. For a moment nobody moved. Then a young Farai engineer with a bright copper crest came over and sat down across from me without asking. Her name, I would later learn, was Priya Doran, half Farai and half something from a colony world I had never heard of, and she looked at me like I had just performed a magic trick. "You were not afraid," she said. It was not a question. I was terrified, I admitted, holding up my hand so she could see it shaking. My whole body still thinks something is about to happen, but where I'm from, terrified does not mean stop. It just means pay attention. She studied me for a long moment. Where you're from must be a strange place. You have no idea, I said, and I meant it more than she could possibly know. Word of what happened in the mess hall spread through the station faster than any official report could have moved. By the time my shift ended, 3 different species had stopped me in the corridors to ask if it was true, if a human girl had really stared down a Vandari trader and made him back away without throwing a single strike. I told them all the same thing. It was true, and it was also nothing special, not where I came from. That night, Station Commander Otero called me into her office. Marisol Otero ran Karos 9 with the tired patience of someone who had spent 20 years keeping different species from tearing each other apart over things that would have been forgotten within a week on any single species world. She waved me into a chair across from her desk and did not waste time on pleasantries. "You want to explain what happened in the mess hall," she said. "He pulled a weapon. I made him put it away without anyone getting hurt," I said. "That's the whole story." That's not the whole story, and you know it. She tapped something on her console, and a security feed appeared, grainy but clear enough. It showed the entire encounter from a ceiling camera. She watched it play through twice before she spoke again. You didn't flinch, not once. Most sapiens freeze or retreat when a blade comes out, even trained security personnel. You walked toward it. I grew up walking toward things, I said. It's not bravery, Commander. It's just how humans learn to survive. She leaned back in her chair, studying me the way you study a puzzle piece that does not quite fit the picture you expected. The compact classified Earth as a death world within the first year of contact. I read the report when it came out. I did not fully understand what it meant until tonight. Most people don't, I said. They read the numbers, the predator counts, the disease statistics, the weather extremes, and they think it means our bodies got tougher. That part is true, but it's the smaller part. The bigger part is what happens up here. I tapped my temple. We stopped being able to bluff. Because on Earth, bluffing gets you killed just as fast as running. If a threat displays and you back away, it teaches the threat that backing away works. So our ancestors, the ones who survived long enough to have children, were the ones who closed distance instead of giving it. Over hundreds of thousands of years, that becomes instinct. It becomes the only setting we have. Otero was quiet for a moment. Threx filed a report against you an hour ago. Claims you assaulted him. My stomach dropped, just slightly, but I kept my voice level. The footage says otherwise. The footage says you disarmed a threat without raising your voice or your fists, she said. It also says his family owns 3 cargo routes through this sector, and his uncle sits on the Regional Trade Council. This is going to get complicated whether the footage helps you or not. So what happens now? Now, she said, you get to explain yourself to people who have never had to survive a single day the way you have. And you get to do it without letting them see you as dangerous instead of capable. There is a difference, and most species out here have trouble telling them apart when it comes to humans. I understood exactly what you meant. 6 years into the compact, and half the galaxy still was not sure if we were partners or a problem waiting to happen. The hearing was scheduled for 2 days later, held in the station's arbitration chamber, a round room with tiered seating meant to hold representatives from every species with an interest in the outcome. I had never stood in front of so many different kinds of eyes at once. Vandari with their mottled hides and clicking mandibles, Farai with crests that shifted color with emotion, T-Skull with their strange double blinking, a pair of compact administrators from a species I did not even recognize, tall and pale and perfectly silent. Threx sat across the chamber with an older Vandari beside him, presumably the uncle Otero had mentioned, a trader named Keswick with an expensive-looking sash across his chest, and an expression that suggested he had already decided how this would end. The presiding officer, a Tiskal judge named Cyril Anwin, opened the proceedings by playing the security footage for the room. I watched myself step forward on the screen, watched the whole chamber tense at the moment the knife came out, and watched the silence that followed when it did not lead anywhere worse. The footage is clear, Judge Anwin said once it finished. The human, Lena Ashford, did not initiate violence. She did not retaliate with violence. She restrained a weapon and de-escalated a confrontation that the other party initiated. I see no basis for a charge of assault. Keswick rose from his seat immediately. With respect, Judge, the footage shows a human closing distance on an armed individual instead of retreating to safety as any reasonable being would. This is not restraint. This is the behavior of a predator confident it could win a physical confrontation. It should concern this chamber greatly that humans respond to threats this way. Murmurs rippled through the tiered seating. I felt my pulse quicken, not from fear of Threx anymore, but from the much larger fear underneath it, the fear that had followed every human who had ever left Earth. The fear of being seen as something to be caged rather than something to be trusted. I stood before anyone gave me permission, and Judge Anwin did not stop me. May I speak? I asked.
You may.
I turned to face the tiered seating instead of the judge. Because the judge already had the footage, it was everyone else who needed the explanation. I understand why what I did looks strange to you, I began. On most worlds in the compact, stepping toward an armed threat looks like aggression. Because on most worlds, stepping toward danger usually means you plan to win a fight through strength. But that is not what happened in that mess hall, and it is not what happens most of the time when a human does this. I paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. Earth is not a gentle place. It never has been. For most of our history as a species, something was always trying to end our lives before we finished growing up. Predators larger and faster than us. Diseases with no cure. Storms, floods, freezing winters, burning summers, all of it constant, all of it unforgiving. We did not survive by being the strongest animal on our planet. We were not. We survived by being the animal that refused to accept the roles that fear tried to assign us. Priya, sitting in the gallery, leaned forward slightly. I kept going. When a threat displays itself, whether it's a predator baring teeth or a person pulling a weapon, it is trying to establish a hierarchy before anything actually happens. It wants you to back away, because backing away confirms that the threat has power over you. Every human ancestor who learned to back away in that moment, who accepted the hierarchy the threat was offering, tended not to survive long enough to raise children who thought the same way. The humans who survived, generation after generation, were the ones who refused the premise entirely, not because we wanted violence, because giving ground to something that intends harm rarely ends the danger. It only postpones it, and teaches the threat that intimidation works. I looked directly at Keswick now. Your nephew pulled a blade on me because he believed it would make me smaller. If I had stepped back, he would have learned that lesson, and he would have used it again on someone else, someone who might not have walked away from it as easily as I did. I did not step forward because I wanted to hurt him. I stepped forward because in my experience, and in the experience written into every cell of my species, closing distance on a threat that intends only to frighten is usually the safest way to end the situation, without anyone getting hurt at all. And it worked. Nobody was injured. The blade went back into its sheath. That was always going to be the outcome, because that was always the goal. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Judge Anwen finally spoke. You are saying that what looked like aggression was, in your species, the opposite, a method of avoiding harm rather than causing it. Yes, I said. We are not calm because we are unafraid. We are calm because fear does not get to make our decisions for us. That is the actual difference between a Death Worlder and everyone else in this room, and it is the thing that 6 years of contact has not managed to explain properly. We are not more violent than other species. We are simply less willing to let a threat dictate the outcome before it has actually happened. Keswick did not have an immediate answer to that. He sat back down slowly, his expensive sash suddenly looking a little less impressive than it had at the start of the hearing. Judge Anwen reviewed the footage one final time before delivering the ruling. The charge against Lena Ashford is dismissed. Furthermore, given the unprovoked nature of the confrontation and the weapon involved, this chamber recommends a formal review of Threx's conduct on this station, including previous incidents brought to security's attention but not formally reported. Priya's crest flushed bright copper, the Farai equivalent of a wide smile. Several other members of the gallery, species I still did not know the names of, made small sounds and gestures I did not fully understand but which felt, unmistakably, like approval. Threx did not look at me on his way out of the chamber. Keswick did, briefly, and there was something in his expression that was not quite respect, but was no longer quite dismissal either. It was the look of someone recalculating an equation they had thought was already solved. After the hearing, Otero found me in the corridor outside the chamber. That went better than I expected, she said. I meant every word of it, I told her. I know, that's exactly why it worked. She studied me for a moment. You know this isn't over, right? Word is going to travel. Every species with a stake in this sector is going to hear how a human handled a threat without violence and without backing down. Some of them are going to respect that. Some of them are going to be more afraid of us than ever. I know, I said, but at least now they'll be afraid of the right thing. Not that we might hurt them for no reason, just that we won't fold when someone tries to hurt us for no reason. There's a difference, and I think that difference is going to matter more as time goes on. Otero almost smiled. 6 years in, and we're still teaching the galaxy what Death Worlders actually are. Give it time, I said. We've only just started. 3 days later, I was back in the mess hall, sitting at the same table, eating the same mediocre protein loaf, when Priya sat down across from me again, this time with a friend, a young T-Skal engineer named Doran File who had apparently heard the story so many times, he wanted to hear it directly from me. Is it true you didn't even raise your hands? He asked, eyes wide with the particular curiosity of someone encountering something entirely outside his species' experience. Didn't need to, I said. The whole point was never to win a fight. It was to make sure a fight never had to happen in the first place. But you weren't scared, he pressed. I was scared the entire time, I said, and I meant it. The same way I had meant it with Priya that first night. Being scared and being controlled by fear are two completely different things. Every human learns that difference early, whether we want to or not. It's not a gift. It's just what 4 billion years of a difficult planet leaves behind in a species that manages to survive it. Doran considered this for a long moment, his double blink slower than usual, the T-Skal equivalent of deep thought. I think I understand it a little better now, he finally said. Though I admit, I am glad I do not have to live it. Most people are, I said, and smiled, and went back to my cold protein loaf, because some lessons are worth losing a warm meal over, and some steps forward are worth taking, even when every instinct in the room around you says to step back instead. The station kept moving after that, the way stations always do. Cargo arriving and departing, shifts changing, arguments rising and falling over things that would be forgotten within a week. But something had shifted in the way people looked at me in the corridors, something quieter than fear and steadier than mere curiosity. Respect, maybe, or the beginning of it. Either way, I kept walking the same corridors, doing the same work, eating the same bad food, one step forward at a time, the way I always had, the way every human before me always had, all the way back to a planet that never once made survival easy, and never once let any of us forget it.